Hi, I'm Katie Woodruff. I'm a public health social scientist at UC San Francisco and presenting today on my work on attitudes toward abortion after receiving or being denied a wanted abortion. This lecture is a summary of the work I did is as captured in the first reference here. And if you're interested in further reading, there are a couple of great pieces on abortion attitudes listed below. Sorry. So for background, something got out of order, sorry. What do we know about abortion attitudes? We know that abortions attitudes have been tracked by the Gallup Company over the decades, and for most of that time, opinion has been pretty stable. About 20% of Americans believe abortion should be illegal in all circumstances. Around 25% think it should be legal under any circumstances, and around 50 to 55% think it should be legal only under certain circumstances. Americans are very careful, though, to distinguish between morality and legality. So while about half of Americans will say that abortion is morally wrong, only 1 in 5 believes it should be illegal under all circumstances. And that also has been fairly stable over the decades. We know that abortion is a fairly common experience. About 1 in 4 women in America will have one in her lifetime. And we know that with increasing state restrictions, there are many more opportunities for people to be denied an abortion when they want one. What we don't know is how that experience of receiving or being denied a wanted abortion may affect attitudes about abortion. And that was what we looked at to study in this analysis. There are other lectures in this series with more detail about the Turnaway study, but just briefly, the intention was to recruit from 30 abortion providers around the country, in each case finding the one who had the latest gestational limit within 150 miles. The idea being if people could not get an abortion at that facility, they probably would not be able to get one easily anywhere else. And then abortion seekers were recruited in 3 main groups: those who were just before the gestational cutoff of that facility, that's what we call the near limits, and they got the abortion they wanted. Those who presented at the clinic up to 3 weeks after that gestational limit and they were turned away, they did not receive their abortion at that clinic. And then to have a comparison group, given that the vast majority of abortions in this country are in the first trimester, we also recruited from people getting their abortions in the first trimester. We recruited for 3 years and followed all those participants with structured interviews every 6 months. For this analysis for 5 years, and for some analyses continuing for 10, and then did in-depth qualitative interviews. Our sample for this analysis was everyone who completed the baseline interview and at least 1 additional interview. So we ended up with 381 near limits who got the abortion they wanted, 191 turnaways who did not get it at that clinic. Of those, 146 went on to give birth, and 45 either miscarried or got their desired abortion elsewhere. And then the first trimester abortion group, 240. We asked 2 questions starting at 6 months past abortion seeking. The first was, do you believe that abortion is morally wrong? Yes, no, or depends on the circumstance. And the second, sorry, this is where I got out of order. Would you describe your political views of abortion as in favor of women having the legal right to have an abortion, in favor of women having the legal right to have an abortion, but only in special situations like rape or incest, or against women having the legal right to have an abortion in any situation? We asked those questions every year, and then we also, after 5 years, did those in-depth qualitative interviews that let us look at these attitudes in more detail. So our results, first from the quantitative side, to look at this for the overall groups first. On the far right column, you can see that about 80%, 20% believed abortion is morally wrong, 65% believed it's not wrong, and about 15% said it depends on the circumstances. And similarly, as for the legal right to abortion, nearly all of our participants supported it in some or all situations. And yet you can still see that 3% of the Turnaway participants were against the legal right to abortion in any situation. And again, this is people who themselves sought abortion. So now let's look at the differences between our 2 central study groups, the near limits and the turnaways. And you can see here that of the turnaways, those who were not able to get their abortion and went on to give birth, 45% of them believed abortion is morally wrong or sometimes morally wrong, depending on the circumstances, compared to only 32% of the near limits who believed that. On the legal right, 80% of people who got their abortion close to the cutoff, those near limits, believed abortion should be legally, that people have the legal right to abortion in all situations, and 59% of the turnaways did, and those were statistically significant differences between those groups. So we continued asking these questions every year, and we conducted logistic mixed effects regression, and this is the results of the trajectories over time. As you can see in the dark solid line is the near limits, people who got the abortion they wanted, people who were turned away is in the dark dashed line, and the first trimester abortion folks are in the gray dotted line. Over time, for all groups, believing that abortion was morally wrong decreased over time. And yet the difference between the groups continued to be statistically significant throughout our study period, such that near limits were more likely to believe that abortion was morally wrong even years later than those who got the abortion they wanted. I'm sorry, turnaways were more likely to believe that abortion was morally wrong than those who got the abortion they wanted. Similarly, with the legal right to abortion, you can see over time, support for the legal right to abortion increased among all study groups over time. And yet, again, women who were denied their wanted abortion were significantly less likely to support the legal right to abortion even years later than people who got the abortion they wanted. On the qualitative side, we were lucky to be able to conduct these in-depth interviews with a subset of the overall sample, and nearly all of those in this subset were asked, when you look back, how do you think the experience of having an abortion or having a baby has changed your perspective on abortion, if at all? And this analysis focused on the 19 participants who expressly discussed their attitudes on abortion. So this just allowed us to explore in a little more nuance the quantitative findings. About half folks said that their views had not changed. They continue to support the right to choose abortion. As one said, it hasn't changed. Like I said, it's woman's choice. I believe that it's always a woman's choice. It hasn't changed my opinion whatsoever. I don't necessarily believe in it as a form of birth control, but it's still a woman's choice. Others, and this was striking across all of our study groups, reported that they increased their empathy or understanding of other people who were seeking abortion. As one woman who was 19, when she got her abortion near the limit of the facility she went to, said, "It has changed my views of abortions. At first I thought that no one should be allowed to have an abortion, with the exception of women who were raped. Then when I was there with a bunch of girls who were also having an abortion the same day, I kind of understood why women would have an abortion. It's not because they want to, it's because sometimes they have to. Sometimes they have a better life for themselves because they wouldn't be able to survive their life with a child." And some people reported this increased empathy even while they continue to hold mixed views about whether and when abortion should be available to others. As one who was turned away at age 21 and subsequently gave birth to a daughter, and she was asked how her experience of giving birth changed her views on abortion, she said, "Well, that's hard because I hate to be a hypocrite and say that I'm against abortion if it's something that I once thought about really doing. And I really considered doing it. But if someone were to ask me, I'd be against it. But then again, to be put in that situation, I understand what they're going through. Then again, I don't understand how. I think I'm more against the late-term abortion." So you can see a somewhat nuanced mix of views reflecting some empathy, some concerns, and this is the kind of data that you can't get at with just quantitative questions. So in conclusion, across all of our groups, support for abortion legality remained high, although views on morality were mixed, and that is true for the American public as a whole. And yet being denied a desired abortion is clearly associated with a sustained reduction in support for abortion rights. And this might be seen as an example of a psychological process that's called post-decision consolidation, where after a decision, you reassess how you felt about it so that you increase the desirability of what of the choice that was made and decrease your view of the desirability of the choice that didn't get made. It's very common as a way of people dealing with the cognitive dissonance between what they wanted to have happen and what actually did happen. Put another way, just women are flexible and resilient, and they make sense of their experiences. We know that attitudes on abortion are complex and they can change over time, and that complexity can reflect stigma as well as empathy. And that's why it's very important to have qualitative data as well to really explore this whole story. Important implications, I think, are to remember that views on abortion morality and legality do not necessarily correspond, but even more so that abortion values do not always correlate with abortion behavior. And it's really important for both policymakers and providers to recognize that people who think abortion is immoral and even think it should be illegal under all circumstances do seek and have abortions. And then future research on abortion attitudes must really carefully distinguish between morality and legality. This question between what I think is right versus what I think should be legally available to others is a very important distinction and has important implications for public policy. And then research should always be qualitative as well as quantitative to really shine the light on these views. With that, I want to recognize the entire Turnaway study team and my co-authors in particular. And if you would like a copy of this paper or have any questions about this research, please feel free to get in touch. Thank you.